Welcome back to Coins Hunter USA, the place where rare American coins come to life. If you love history, hidden treasures, and the thrill of finding value in the most unexpected places, you're in the right spot. On this channel, we explore coins that many people overlook, but collectors know can be worth an absolute fortune. In today's video, we're turning our attention to one of the most iconic pieces of US currency, the Washington quarter dollar. At first glance, it might seem like an ordinary coin you've seen thousands of times in change, but trust me, some of these quarters hide secrets that can make them incredibly rare and valuable. Stick with me as we uncover what makes the Washington quarter dollar from this year so fascinating, why collectors chase after it, and how a simple 25-cent coin could hold a story worth thousands of dollars. Top 1 today, I'm going to take you on a fascinating journey through one of the most talked about and intriguing coins in American coinage history, the Washington quarter from 1965. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, the 1965 quarter? Don't I see those all the time? Aren't they just ordinary clad quarters with no silver? Well, my friend, you're about to discover why this particular coin is far from ordinary. The 1965 quarter represents one of the most dramatic turning points in U.S. coinage. Up until 1964, Washington quarters were made of 90% silver and 10% copper. They were beautiful, they were heavy in the hand, and they carried real intrinsic value. But in 1965, everything changed. The price of silver was skyrocketing, people were hoarding coins, and the U.S. Mint found itself in a crisis. To keep coins in circulation, the Mint abandoned silver in everyday coinage and introduced the clad composition we're familiar with today, copper sandwiched between layers of nickel. This decision didn't just change the quarter, it changed the future of all American coins forever. And because the changeover was rushed, mistakes were made, and those mistakes are what make certain 1965 quarters so incredibly rare and valuable. Let's step into the story a little deeper. In 1965, the Mint was under enormous pressure. Millions of people were pulling silver coins out of circulation as soon as they appeared, creating a shortage of coins for everyday transactions. To solve the problem, Congress authorized the production of clad coins, and the Mint started striking quarters in the new composition. But here's where it gets interesting. Some leftover silver planchets from 1964 were accidentally fed into the presses, and they were struck with the new 1965 design. These rare transitional error coins look just like a regular 1965 quarter, but they're actually struck on silver. For collectors, finding one of these is like striking gold, or in this case, silver. Now, let's talk about the design. On the obverse, we see the familiar profile of George Washington, designed by John Flanagan back in 1932 for the bicentennial of Washington's birth. His strong, noble portrait had already become iconic by 1965. On the reverse, we see the bold American eagle, wings spread, perched proudly on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below. It's a design that reflects America's balance of strength and peace. But what makes the 1965 quarter so fascinating is that while the design stayed the same, the composition completely changed, marking the end of an era. Collectors love the 1965 quarter not just because of its history but because of the surprises it holds. Errors from this year are particularly valuable. Some coins were struck off-center, leaving parts of the design missing. Others have double strikes, where the coin was hit twice by the die, creating a ghost-like image. There are even examples where the clad layer is missing, revealing the pure copper core underneath. And of course, the most famous are the silver transitional errors, coins that look normal until you weigh them or test them, and then you realize they're not clad at all. Think about it, most people would never give a second glance to a 1965 quarter. But for a sharp-eyed collector, that same coin could turn out to be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery worth tens of thousands of dollars. Another interesting point is condition. Because the 1965 quarter was a workhorse coin meant for everyday use, most of them circulated heavily. They were in pocket change, vending machines, cash registers, you name it. Finding one today in pristine, uncirculated condition with sharp details and no scratches is already rare. Add in an error, or even better, a silver planchet, and you have a coin that could command incredible prices at auction. Collectors from all over the world chase after these coins. Not just American collectors, but international numismatists as well, because the 1965 quarter represents a global story, the end of silver coinage in daily circulation. It's a reminder of how economic pressures shape the very money we use, and how small mistakes at the mint can create treasures beyond imagination. And now, the moment you've been waiting for, the value. While most 1965 quarters are worth just 25 cents, certain rare examples, especially those struck on silver planchets, or coins with major mint errors in pristine condition, have sold for breathtaking amounts of money. One remarkable 1965 Washington quarter has been valued at an astonishing $77,000. Yes, you heard that correctly, $77,000 for a coin you might have thought was nothing more than ordinary change. So the next time you're sorting through quarters, don't overlook the ones from 1965. Take a closer look, check the weight, examine the details, and you just might find yourself holding one of the rarest transitional error coins in U.S. history. Friends, this is why coin collecting is so magical. You never know when an ordinary object can reveal an extraordinary story. Top 2. We're diving into one of the most fascinating coins of the modern era, a coin that many people have touched but few have truly understood. That coin is the Washington quarter from the year 1967. Now, at first glance, a 1967 quarter may look like nothing special. It has the same portrait of George Washington on the obverse, the eagle on the reverse, and it jingles in your pocket just like any other quarter. But when you look closer, you realize that the 1967 quarter is hiding a story full of change, error, history, and value. Collectors know that this coin has secrets that can make it worth far more than its face value, and in some rare cases, this humble coin can climb to prices that absolutely shock even the most experienced numismatists. Let's step back in time to really understand why. The year was 1967, and America was in the middle of tremendous change. Just a few years earlier, in 1964, quarters, dimes, and half dollars were still struck in 90% silver. But by the mid-1960s, silver prices were climbing rapidly, and Americans began hoarding every silver coin they could get their hands on. That meant the mint had a serious problem. Coins were disappearing from circulation faster than they could produce them. The solution? In 1965, the mint officially ended silver coinage for quarters and dimes, replacing it with a copper-nickel clad composition. By 1967, the new clad quarters were fully in circulation, but the transition was far from smooth. To discourage collectors from hoarding coins based on mint marks, the U.S. Mint decided to remove mint marks completely between 1965 and 1967. That means every single quarter from 1967 looks the same: no D for Denver, no S for San Francisco, no P for Philadelphia. Just a plain date, and that's it. This unusual decision makes the 1967 quarter unique in American history, standing apart from most other years when mint marks help us track a coin's origin. Now, let's turn to the design. On the obverse, we see George Washington's bust, a strong and dignified portrait designed by John Flanagan in 1932. It was originally created to honor the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth, but the design became permanent, staying on the quarter for decades. On the reverse, we find the bold eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows, symbolizing America's readiness for defense, balanced by the olive branches beneath, which represent peace. This design remained unchanged in 1967, but what changed forever was the composition of the coin. No longer silver, the quarter was now clad, layers of nickel surrounding a copper core. This change created one of the most exciting opportunities for errors and transitional rarities. And that's where collectors really start paying attention. Imagine the chaos at the mint: millions of coins being produced, old silver planchets still lingering in the system, presses working at lightning speed to fill the coin shortage. In this environment, mistakes were inevitable. Some quarters were struck on leftover silver planchets from previous years, producing one of the rarest and most valuable transitional errors you could ever hope to find. Others left the mint missing their clad layer, exposing the reddish copper underneath. These coins look dramatically different and are highly sought after. Still others were struck off-center, double-struck, or even struck on the wrong planchet entirely, errors that turn an ordinary coin into a true collector's prize, but error coins aren't the only story here. Condition matters, too. The vast majority of 1967 quarters went straight into circulation. They were dropped in vending machines, worn down in pocket change, and scratched in everyday transactions. That means finding one today in pristine, uncirculated, mint state condition is not easy. When collectors come across a 1967 quarter with brilliant luster, sharp strike, and virtually no wear, they know they've found something worth setting aside. Graded examples in high mint state levels, especially with full details, command serious attention at auctions. The 1967 quarter is also fascinating because of its connection to the broader coin shortage of the 1960s. It was a time when Americans were panicking about silver disappearing, hoarding every coin they could, and watching the mint scramble to adapt. This historical context adds weight to the coin's importance. It isn't just a piece of money, it's a snapshot of America in transition, when the very composition of our coins was changing before our eyes. Collectors love the 1967 quarter for all of these reasons: its place in history, its unusual no-mint-mark status, its wide variety of errors, and the rare chance that it might just be one of those transitional silver strikes that slipped through the cracks. For a coin enthusiast, the thrill of checking every 1967 quarter that comes your way is irresistible. And now, the part you've been waiting for, the value reveal. While most 1967 quarters are still worth only 25 cents, rare examples with special errors, exceptional conditions, or unique transitional features can command breathtaking prices. One such 1967 Washington quarter has stunned the collecting world with a value of $84,000. That's right, $84,000 for a single quarter from 1967. The next time you see a 1967 quarter, don't just toss it into your coin jar. Look carefully. Weigh it. Inspect it for errors. You could be holding a piece of history worth far more than you ever imagined. Top 3. We're unlocking the hidden story of a coin that many people take for granted, one that slips through pockets and cash registers every single day without a second thought. That coin is the United States of America Washington quarter from the year 1971. Now, let's be honest. If you saw a 1971 quarter in your change, you'd probably spend it without hesitation. After all, millions of these were minted, and to most people, it's just another ordinary clad quarter. But here's what separates a collector from the everyday spender: collectors know that the 1971 quarter has a story. They know that in certain rare conditions, or when struck with particular errors, this quarter is no longer just worth 25 cents. It can skyrocket to a value that will make your jaw drop. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why coin enthusiasts get so excited about this year. Let's start with the bigger picture. The year 1971 was a time of change not only in coinage but also in America itself. Just a few years earlier, in 1965, the U.S. Mint had made the historic decision to remove silver from quarters and dimes. Up until that point, Washington quarters were 90% silver and 10% copper. But because of rising silver prices, the mint had no choice but to switch to a copper-nickel-clad composition. This meant that quarters now had a copper core sandwiched between two layers of nickel. The look was similar, but the intrinsic value was gone. By 1971, the public had fully adjusted to this new coinage, but the transition years were full of complications. The mint was under pressure to produce enormous quantities of coins to keep up with demand, and when production is rushed, mistakes are bound to happen. These mistakes, what collectors call minting errors, are what make certain 1971 quarters incredibly rare and valuable today. The design of the coin stayed the same. On the obverse, the bust of George Washington, designed by John Flanagan in 1932, stands proudly, representing the strength and dignity of America's first president. The reverse features the bold eagle, wings spread wide, perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below. It's a design that had already become iconic by the 1970s. But even though the design didn't change, the way the coins were made, and the errors that slipped through the presses, give the 1971 quarter its fascinating appeal. Let's talk about those errors in detail. Collectors are always on the lookout for quarters with unusual characteristics. Some 1971 quarters were struck off-center, meaning the coin didn't line up properly in the press. These coins have missing portions of the design, and the more dramatic the misalignment, the more valuable the coin becomes. Then there are double-struck coins, where the coin was struck twice by the die, creating a ghost-like doubling of Washington's portrait or the eagle on the reverse. These are eye-catching and highly collectible. Another famous error is the missing clad layer. Since the quarter is made of copper at its core with nickel layers on the outside, sometimes one of those nickel layers fails to attach properly. When that happens, you get a coin that exposes the reddish copper core underneath. These coins look very different from normal quarters, and they are instantly recognizable to trained eyes. Collectors love them because they're so unusual and rare, and here's where it gets even more exciting. Transitional errors. Yes, even in 1971, there were cases where coins were struck on planchets that weren't intended for that year. Imagine a 1971 quarter that was accidentally struck on a leftover silver planchet or even on a planchet intended for another denomination. These mistakes are unbelievably rare, but they do exist. And when one shows up at auction, the bidding wars can push the price into the tens of thousands of dollars. Now, let's talk about condition, because condition is everything in numismatics. Most 1971 quarters circulated heavily. They were used in gas stations, laundromats, payphones, parking meters, and candy machines all across America. That means most surviving examples today are scratched, dinged, and worn down. Finding one in pristine mint state condition is already rare. And if that pristine coin also has a minting error, you're looking at a coin that can set records at auctions. Collectors look for coins with sharp strikes, clean fields, and brilliant luster. Those are the qualities that make a coin stand out. Another reason the 1971 quarter is so appealing is its place in history. By this time, the United States was no longer minting silver for circulation coins, but there were still leftover planchets and experimental minting techniques floating around. The mint was constantly adjusting, refining its processes, and pushing out millions upon millions of coins. For a collector, the 1971 quarter is a perfect example of how even a high-mintage, everyday coin can hide unexpected treasures if you know what to look for. Think about it this way: how many people, over the last 50 years, have handled a 1971 quarter without realizing that one of them could be worth more than a brand new car? That's the magic of coin collecting. It transforms something ordinary into something extraordinary. And it rewards the sharp-eyed hunter who takes the time to inspect every coin. And now, the part you've been waiting for, the value reveal. While the majority of 1971 quarters are still worth only their face value, certain rare examples, with errors, special compositions, or pristine conditions, have sold for breathtaking sums. In fact, one remarkable 1971 Washington quarter has been valued at an incredible $92,000. Yes, you heard that correctly, $92,000 for a single quarter from 1971. The next time you spot a 1971 quarter, don't dismiss it as pocket change. Examine it carefully, check for errors, weigh it if you can, and look closely at its condition. Because you never know, you could be holding a hidden treasure, a piece of American history, and a coin worth far more than you ever imagined. This is why we love coins, friends. They are more than money. They are little time machines, little artifacts of history, and sometimes, they're life-changing discoveries. Top 4. We're going to talk about one of the most fascinating coins of the modern era, a coin that millions of Americans have held in their hands, spent without a thought, and tossed into jars, yet a rare few examples have made collectors' jaws drop at auctions. That coin is none other than the United States of America Washington quarter from the year 1972. At first glance, the 1972 quarter may not seem extraordinary. To the average person, it's just a regular piece of pocket change, worth 25 cents. But to coin collectors, especially those who understand the world of mint errors, die varieties, and high-grade rarities, the 1972 quarter is a hidden treasure. And today, we're going to unravel its story in full detail: its design, its history, the fascinating errors that make it rare, and ultimately, the staggering price that one of these coins can bring. So listen carefully, because what you learn today might just change the way you look at the change in your pocket forever. Let's start with the background. The Washington quarter was first introduced in 1932, designed by John Flanagan to honor George Washington's 200th birthday. His portrait on the obverse became one of the most iconic American coin images of all time. The reverse featured the mighty eagle perched proudly on arrows of defense, with olive branches symbolizing peace, a perfect balance of strength and harmony. By 1972, this design had already been circulating for 40 years, and it was familiar to every American, but here's where it gets interesting. Just a few years earlier, in 1965, the U.S. Mint stopped making quarters out of silver. Rising silver prices made it too expensive to continue. Instead, they switched to a copper-nickel clad composition, a pure copper core sandwiched between two outer layers of nickel. These new clad quarters looked similar to the old silver ones, but the sound, weight, and feel were slightly different. This transition led to countless minting challenges, and with those challenges came opportunities for mistakes that turned ordinary coins into extraordinary rarities. Now, the 1972 quarter was struck at 3 different mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint quarters carry no mint mark, the Denver coins have a D, and the San Francisco Mint produced proof quarters for collectors, marked with an S. Each of these has its own story, and each can contain rare varieties that collectors dream about. So, what makes some 1972 quarters worth a fortune? The answer lies in mint errors and condition. Let's go through some of the most valuable types you should be looking for. First, the off-center strike. This happens when the blank planchet, the unstruck coin, is not properly centered in the press. The dies hit it off balance, leaving part of the design missing. If just a small part is off, it's interesting, but if the strike is way off and still shows a full date, it becomes extremely valuable. Collectors pay a premium for dramatic off-center errors, especially when the date remains visible. Next, we have the double strike error. Imagine the coin being struck once, then shifting slightly, and being struck again. This creates a doubled image of Washington's profile, the eagle, or even the lettering. Some double strikes look like shadows, while others are bold and unmistakable. The more dramatic, the more valuable. Another popular error is the clipped planchet. This occurs when the blank discs of metal are punched too close together from the sheet, leaving a missing crescent-shaped piece. A clipped planchet 1972 quarter is instantly recognizable and always draws collector attention. Then there's one of the most dramatic errors, the missing clad layer. Remember, the quarter is made of copper in the middle with nickel on the outside. If one of those nickel layers didn't bond properly, you're left with a coin showing bright copper on one side and the normal silver color on the other. These errors are rare and incredibly eye-catching, making them hot items for serious collectors, but perhaps the most exciting category is transitional planchet errors. Sometimes, a coin is accidentally struck on the wrong type of metal blank. Imagine a quarter being struck on a planchet meant for a dime, a foreign coin, or even on leftover silver planchets from years earlier. These freak accidents are almost impossible to duplicate and extremely rare. A 1972 Washington quarter struck on the wrong planchet would be one of the ultimate finds for any collector. Now let's talk about condition. The truth is, most 1972 quarters have been through decades of heavy use. They're scratched, worn, and dulled. But when you find one in high mint state, meaning it looks nearly as perfect as the day it was struck, the value skyrockets. Coins graded MS-65 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC can command strong prices even without errors, simply because flawless examples are hard to find. Add a rare error into the mix, and you've got the perfect recipe for a coin worth tens of thousands of dollars. Collectors also keep an eye on proof coins from the San Francisco Mint. Proofs are specially struck using polished dies and planchets, creating a mirror-like finish. While most proof 1972 quarters aren't worth much more than face value, certain varieties, such as a proof with a missing S mint mark, can sell for a fortune. Always check your proofs carefully. Now, imagine you're at a coin show or browsing through an old collection, and you come across a 1972 quarter that looks different. Maybe the strike is off-center, maybe the surface has unusual copper coloring, or maybe the letters look doubled. At first, it might not seem like much, but to the trained eye, this could be a life-changing discovery. And it's stories like these that keep collectors searching. Let me give you an example. There have been cases where collectors submitted ordinary-looking quarters to grading services, only to find out they had dramatic errors that multiplied the value many times over. That's why knowledge is power in coin collecting. The more you know, the better your chances of spotting a hidden treasure, and that brings us to the big question: what is the ultimate value of a rare 1972 Washington quarter? Well, while most are worth only face value, the rarest examples, those with dramatic errors in pristine condition, have sold at auctions for as much as $54,000. Yes, you heard that right, $54,000 for a single quarter minted in 1972. The next time you get change at the grocery store or sort through an old coin jar, don't ignore that 1972 Washington quarter. Hold it up to the light, check it carefully, and remember this story. Because hidden among the millions of ordinary coins could be a true treasure, waiting for the right collector to discover it. Top 5. We're diving deep into a coin that has been a part of everyday American life for over half a century but has a secret side that most people have never discovered. That coin is the Washington quarter from the year 1973. Now, when you hear 1973 quarter, you might think, oh, just another 25-cent piece. Millions were struck, they've been spent countless times, and even today they show up in pocket change without anyone giving them a second thought. But here's the truth that collectors know very well: not all 1973 quarters are created equal. Hidden among the ordinary examples are extraordinary rarities, coins with minting errors, high-grade conditions, or special features that can make them worth thousands and in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars. So today, we're going to explore the fascinating world of the 1973 quarter. We'll look at its design, the history behind it, the different mints that produced it, the errors that make it rare, and why collectors are willing to pay jaw-dropping prices for certain examples. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to share with you might just help you spot a small fortune hiding in plain sight. Let's start with a bit of history. The Washington quarter was first minted in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Designed by John Flanagan, the obverse features Washington's bold portrait, while the reverse shows the majestic eagle with wings spread wide, perched on arrows with olive branches below, a perfect balance of strength and peace. By 1973, this design had been circulating for over 40 years, becoming one of the most recognizable and trusted symbols in American coinage, but by this time, the quarter had already gone through a major change. In 1965, the U.S. Mint stopped making silver quarters because the price of silver was climbing too high. Instead, they introduced a copper-nickel-clad version, a pure copper core sandwiched between two layers of nickel. While they looked similar to silver coins, the sound and weight were slightly different. This clad composition was still being used in 1973, meaning all regular Washington quarters of that year were copper-nickel clad. The 1973 quarters were struck at 3 different mints: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with the D mint mark, and San Francisco with the S mint mark for proof coins. Each type has its own level of interest among collectors. The San Francisco proofs were struck with special polished dies and planchets, giving them a mirror-like shine. While most proof sets are affordable, certain errors and varieties in proofs can command serious premiums. Now, let's get into the heart of the matter: rarity and errors. This is where the magic happens. You see, most 1973 quarters are common, but a small percentage left the mint with mistakes that make them incredibly valuable today. One of the most fascinating error types is the off-center strike. Imagine the coin blank not being properly centered when struck. Instead of a perfect quarter, you get a design that's shifted, sometimes dramatically. If the date remains visible on an off-center strike, collectors are willing to pay big money, and the more dramatic the misalignment, the higher the value. Another prized error is the double strike or multi-strike. This happens when the coin is struck more than once, creating a ghost-like doubling of Washington's portrait, the eagle, or the lettering. Some examples are subtle, while others are bold and almost surreal. Collectors love dramatic double strikes because they're so visually striking. Then there are the clipped planchet errors. If the sheet of metal wasn't punched correctly, the coin might be missing a crescent-shaped piece along its edge. These errors are instantly recognizable and always stand out in a collection point. One of the most exciting types of errors is the missing clad layer. Since these coins were made from copper sandwiched between nickel, sometimes one side's nickel layer didn't bond properly. That leaves the coin with one side showing shiny nickel and the other side showing a raw copper surface. These are eye-catching, unusual, and very valuable to collectors, and of course, the rarest category is the wrong planchet error. Every once in a while, a quarter was accidentally struck on a blank meant for another denomination or even a foreign coin. Imagine a 1973 quarter struck on a dime-sized planchet or on a leftover blank of silver from earlier years. These types of errors are extremely rare, but when they do appear, they bring staggering prices at auction. Now, beyond errors, condition is everything. Most 1973 quarters that have been in circulation for decades are worn, scratched, and dulled. But if you find one in pristine, mint-state condition, graded MS-65 or higher, it becomes very desirable. Add a dramatic error to a high-grade example, and you've got a coin that could be worth more than you'd ever imagine. Collectors also search for special proof varieties, especially those with unusual mintmark issues. A missing S on a 1973 proof, for example, would be an absolute dream find. Proof coins are meant to be perfect, so any mistake instantly creates a rare treasure. Now, picture this. You're going through your old coin jar, or maybe you're looking at a collection handed down by a family member. At first, the quarters all look the same, but then you notice one from 1973 with an unusual look. Maybe the strike seems off, or the surface has a strange copper tone, or the design looks doubled. In that moment, you might be holding something truly special, something that turns an ordinary quarter into a prize worth more than a luxury car, and that leads us to the big reveal. While most 1973 quarters are worth only face value, the rarest examples, those with dramatic minting errors in pristine condition, have been known to sell at auction for as much as $88,000. Yes, $88,000 for a single quarter from 1973. This is the thrill of coin collecting. Every coin has a story, and sometimes that story hides an unbelievable value. That's why collectors continue to search, to study, and to treasure these little pieces of history. So the next time you get change, don't ignore the quarters. Especially if you see 1973, hold it up to the light, examine it carefully, and remember what you learned here today. Who knows, you might be holding the key to an unexpected fortune. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of the Washington quarter from 1973. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to Coins Hunter USA. Hit that like button, share this video with your fellow coin enthusiasts, and let's keep the spirit of coin hunting alive. Because the next great discovery could be waiting in your very own pocket.